So, where we left off in part one was where I was with a guy. I just finished coming out of the stripping industry or dancing industry and met a guy and decided to leave that industry for love, or what I thought would be my chance at love. And so here I am in this relationship with a man that we might have stayed together a year and a half. I'm not really good with timelines, but it wasn't that long, maybe a year and a half. But shortly, I would come to find out that that wasn't fulfilling again, just like all my other relationships, not fulfilling. And not that he was mean to me. We had a lot of fun together. We went to a lot of fun places. We had a lot of good kissing sessions and sex. But something was missing and I couldn't figure out what it was. And in between that relationship and going to college, I start to meet people who start to invite me to church. And so I ended up in one church and then I ended up in another. And there would be the beginning of me understanding and coming to know this God that I had never really had a relationship with. Now, I have grown up Catholic since I was very young. My mother put me in Catholic school. I made communion. I didn't make my confirmation, but I do remember going to church every Sunday, going to Sunday school, and learning prayers. I'm not really sure what I learned in school. My memory's not that great, but I know that I was raised Catholic. I don't remember, though, that my mother ever stepped foot in church. I don't remember that my father ever did either. But raised Catholic, and now here I am learning about God for the first time in a very different way. I'm learning who he is. I'm learning that he wrote the Bible. I'm learning that he wants good things for me. I'm learning about Jesus and whatever else they were teaching me. But all I know that in all of the learning that I got introduced to now, coming to Christ, coming to church at 20 years old, I'm discovering something I had never discovered in my life. And it's something I can't actually express to you. It's something I just know that I felt when I was there in church and being with these people who were, I almost felt like they were filled with light and that had halos over their head. I felt like I was where I needed to be. I felt whole all of a sudden, and I felt joy all of a sudden, and I started to feel peace. But I was still in a relationship with this guy, and because it was a little rocky, we weren't in a great place. I started to cling more to people in the church and learning who this God was that I felt so loved by every morning. And I didn't even know why. I just knew that I felt so much joy that it was so unexplainable. And I felt peace. And so I had to reconcile for myself, walking away from a physical relationship where I wanted to feel loved and going now into a spiritual relationship with a God that I had no idea about. But I knew that when I looked at these people, they emulated something different than what I was exposed to in the world by my family, by my friends, and men. There was like a huge distinction between them and people in the world. And so I wanted to continue learning about what this was. That relationship with God slowly started to separate me from my relationship with that man. Now, if I fast forward from 21 years old all the way until, like, let's say 24, I would have this relationship with God where there was so much peace and so much joy, but yet at the very same time, I started to develop this kind of pride for following him. I kind of started to look down on others for now the things that they were engaging in that I was no longer engaging in, whether it was sex or drinking or clubbing and all the wild behavior. I started to look down on them. And so at that age, I just want to say, I didn't realize then that I was doing that. A lot of looking back on those years as an adult and now looking into who I was back then and saying, Eesh, like I was really hard on people back then, really critical, really judgmental because I was now a changed woman. I was a changed young girl who wasn't doing those things and engaging in those things. And I would say, how could you do those things? I would look at them with judgment. And that's only now I can look back and say that that's how I actually felt. So now, 21 years old, 22 years old, 23 years old, and up until 24, I'm in this relationship with God, and it seems like it's almost smooth sailing until I start to desire love again in relationships, and I start to look back and I start to desire or entertain these requests from men. And that is how my son was born. And so I met a guy one day. I think I met him while I was driving in the snow. My tire popped. He helped me. We started dating. He fixed my car. And then I knew what kind of guy he was. I knew that he was somewhat of a womanizer only after I had fallen for him, fallen for spending time with him. Had I gotten a phone call one day from a girl who said she was still with him. And so, in my jealousy and in my desire to like obtain him or have him for myself, I started a fight with him and we have sex that night and I get pregnant. So here I am again, pregnant, now at 24 years old. But now at this point, because I'm no longer 14 years old, it's actually 10 years later. I'm 24 years old and I'm pregnant. Now I got to share this stuff with my parents. And so being just as defeated as the first time and just as scared to tell my parents, this time around, I wasn't going to have an abortion. This time around, I knew that I wanted to have him. And so now, today, I have a 19 or almost 19-year-old boy, which I do not regret, but I do regret the situation that I put myself in to obtain once again this love that I was desiring, that I thought I had found in God. But I looked back and I looked back into the world for something where I knew wasn't going to give me satisfaction. But yet the loneliness crept in, the desires crept in, and maybe my relationship with God wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And so desire crept in, and here I am laying with a man again, getting myself pregnant at 24 years old. So in that relationship, it became very toxic. He was cheating on me, and I would be one of those girls that would be raising their child single. Even while we were together, I knew he was messing with somebody. And so, giving birth to my son, I did it all by myself. I raised my own son by myself. And although sometimes his father would see him and wanted to see him and wanted to have a relationship with him, I basically raised him all by myself. He needed diapers, doctor visits, camp, year after year. I did it by myself. And I do believe those were the consequences of the choices that I made. And you know, I talk about, if you look at all my other videos, I talk about free will and how when you want to step into something, you have to know and count the cost of what that is going to cost you in the long run. And so, me not doing my homework and getting to know this person better, I stepped into the relationship blindly and got pregnant quite quickly. And did that change his womanizing? No, it got worse. And now me being pregnant from a man now that who I had feelings for stronger than before I got pregnant, I became so heartbroken, so lost, so defeated. And then when I knew that I was pregnant, something happened. I had realized that, wait a minute, how can God forgive me? It's not like you can take this away, this belly. You're going to have it for 9 months. And so for years, I started to drift away from God. because I thought I was unforgivable. There's no way God could allow me back in church like this. I may have not had the closest of friendships back then to encourage me that this was not God's word and this is not how God works. But I wanted for some reason to tell myself, you can't forgive me, God. How could you forgive me? I didn't seek my Bible. I didn't seek for understanding. And over the next few months and years, I would tell myself, there's no place for me at church. And that's exactly what my actions were from that point forward. And I will go through a spiral, a downward spiral of living the way that I did before, going back to the things that I lived and the lifestyles that I was in before, going back to sexual activity, going back to looking for love in all the wrong places. And I slowly parted from God without even realizing it. I just stopped going to church. I stopped being with people that would encourage me and admonish me in the word. And so again, now 24 years old, 25, 26, all the way for about another 8 years, I would go back to being lost, completely lost, more lost even than I was before I met God in the first place. I had a turbulent relationship with my son's father. It became very abusive and toxic. We would try to get back together, but nothing would mend all the wounds that he would give me in the duration of the time from when my son was born through maybe 5 years old. And I mean, he has no idea to this day how much he had put me through and how much hate I started to gain in my heart towards all men because of him. Because he had destroyed me. He was the one man who got me pregnant, who I had now had his child, the one man I was trying to get love from. And here he was out there with all other women. He destroyed me. And only my family knows what like torment I had gone through, the tears, the crying, the loneliness, and the late night calls that I would have with people because of the destruction of this relationship and what it was doing to my mind. I even remember he had me so crazy one day that I was driving my car and I don't even remember looking at the road. All I remember was thinking about what he was doing and the heartbreak that he was making me go through, that I actually crashed my own car into a curb, like a curb. It wasn't even a car. Like I didn't see that it was not necessarily a dead end road, but it was a road where you either go left or right. You can't keep going straight. But I kept going straight. And I went over this massive curb that was like this high. And my airbag smacked me in the face and I jacked up my car. And this is where relationships would always have me spiraling, downward spiral, depression, can't think, chasing them. It was just crazy. Just crazy, crazy. And sometimes I laugh, but it's not really funny because when I was going through the relationships that I had from the age of 14 all the way till that point, I had gone through so many different men looking for love in all these places. And they had done such horrible things to me, lie to me, cheat on me, dating other girls. They were just like me, just as lost, looking for love or looking for sex, and just using people. Everybody back then was just using people. This was my life. And so the older I got, the more love I wanted, but the more holes that these men were creating in my life. And so here I am now with no God because I don't feel qualified to sit in church. I'm not qualified. And so I kept myself from him for so long. 8 years later, I would come to finally go to another church. And this time, I found a church that I would stay in for the next 8 or 9 years, even up until COVID happened. So this is the place where I would restore my relationship with God. I would learn to let Him forgive me and embrace me, which still took even more time. Still was not fully understandable for me that He can love me and forgive me for all that I had done, because I had backslid. I had gone back into the world, and I had done my life times 10, times 100, all the things that I had lived in before I came to Him.